Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm excited to see a bunch of names I haven't seen before and excited about the size of this cohort for cohort 2. We're really pleased that all of you can join us here. This is the first of our live events, and so we have a group of faculty who are experienced with online teaching, who are going to answer some of your questions and some general questions that we've also come up with, kind of comparing the roles of an online instructor compared to being face-to-face, and how they handle the experience of being an online instructor. So thank you to Sheila, Della, Eric, Sue, and Linda for being here with us. I'll have to check the list again to see if Sue's popped in yet, but she may be joining us a few minutes late. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I am going to stop my screen share. We are recording this event. Please feel free to add any questions that you have as we go through this experience. And add those to the chat, and we'll either tackle them as we go, or we'll have time at the end to answer those questions as well, and you can jump on with your speaker and unmute yourself. So to get started, I'm just going to kind of go down the list and ask each of you to respond to the questions that we'd provided before. So to start with, Sheila, we'll put you on the spot. Can you talk about the changes that you've noticed in the role of a teacher in the online environment?
Sure. So I think really for me, I've already taught online classes in the past, but those were also to students who had signed up to take online classes. So I think for me as a teacher, teaching some students who did not intentionally sign up to take online classes, I think I felt as if my role was not only delivering the material, but also kind of serving as a I don't know what the exact right word is, but really just making sure that I was checking in on them, making sure that that my students heard from me often, because we were no longer seeing each other. And so I did a couple of extra credit quizzes early on that I called, what did I call them? Comfort and concern quizzes that really just made sure that they had access to the internet. So if they took it, I was assuming that they were hopefully okay. And then I followed up with the students I didn't hear from. So I just feel like my role for those specific students was more focused on just making sure they were doing okay, in addition to getting through the material. And I think doing that up front was very helpful, because nearly all of my students, today's their deadline and they've gotten through all of their assignments. So I would say that was the biggest thing for me, was just adjusting to, hey, they didn't sign up to do this. I got to make sure I kind of nudge them along and keep them going.
That's a great perspective on how to help them through this crazy remote process. Della, do you want to add your input?
I'd be happy to. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. One of the things I'd really like to focus on for me as an instructor was the social-emotional learning needs of my students. I really felt like they needed to still feel connected, not only to the course, but to each other and to me as their instructor. So really focusing on helping them know that I was still there, know that I was concerned, helping them set goals that were realistic given the new format that they were kind of thrown into. I think that for them, the biggest thing has been that connectedness. As a teacher, I really had to think about how I was going to transition my course to make sure I was making it connected for students, make sure that they still had ways to kind of hear and see each other, even in an online format when we switched from face-to-face. And really maintain and establish those positive relationships was critical, I think, for my students and for me as well.
I agree that the relationships have been so huge as a big part of this transition process. Eric, who is joining us from Polytechnic, can you share a little bit about how things have gone for you?
Sure. I've kind of looked at myself more as a facilitator or guide in the learning process. And I've heard from the other colleagues here that connection with the students is important, and that's true. I would send them emails for checking in. I'd also make small little videos for checking in for the announcements to the students so they can get some FaceTime with you. And I tried this time virtual office hours. I taught online before, never really did the virtual office hour, but decided to try that this time, and it had a lot of good responses with the virtual office hours. That way they can call in, they can ask you any questions, and it seemed to really help a lot with the process.
Excellent. Following up on Eric, were those just really general? I know some folks have talked about in the past that they struggle with those virtual office hours that students don't attend, the same way they don't necessarily show up in your office during your regular office hours.
I actually had more students show up at the virtual office hours than I do face-to-face.
Excellent.
I had around 17 to 20 students this semester drop in the virtual office hours. What I would do is I'd set them up for a couple hours every day from Monday through Thursday, and they would drop in. I was really surprised the number of people who actually attended.
Excellent. Good. I mean, it shows that they really need that engagement. So good. And then Linda, how has this process been for you and your role as a teacher?
Good morning. My courses, I teach the distance and campus versions both. And so for my campus class, the majority of the content was already online. They were used to that part. As everybody's mentioned, just checking in with students to see how they're doing emotionally also. So one of the things that I did was hold some sessions outside of our class time, because I taught synchronously, that lectures that were recorded also, but I'll talk about that on another question. So I had some sessions that they could voluntarily show up, and that's all we did was just say, how are you doing? What's your life like now? You know, is there anything we can help you with? Any resources? And they just wanted to get together and just chat. The other thing that I did was my distance students always look ahead. My campus students don't. Most of them didn't even bring up the PowerPoint for the day's lecture until the day of class. So I started doing a lot more announcements. More communication was key for them. And so I would put up announcements. Okay, this is what we're doing in tomorrow's lecture. These are the handouts you need to make sure you have ready. And just gave them a heads up, because they're not used to thinking ahead like my distance students are. And then the other thing was something that's been mentioned over and over when we transitioned to all online teaching was to be flexible. And so with campus and distance students both, I was very flexible with due dates and expectations, giving them passes, you know, to turn in an assignment past the time without penalty. Because the distance students, actually, I saw impacted by this more than my campus students, because most of them had children at home on a regular basis, and they were competing for time. But some of my campus students who may have worked in the evenings or the weekends for medical facilities were now have had the opportunity to work during the days. And so they were actually, some of them increased their work hours. And so I just tried to be very flexible. I didn't tell everybody in an announcement, I'm going to let you turn things, you know, in a week later, because I wanted them to stay on task as much as they could. But I did say, if you are struggling meeting assignment deadlines, email me. We're going to talk about this. And then I let them know, yes, we can grant extensions. And they really appreciated that. I don't feel like they abused that at all.
Excellent. Great input. Okay, so Sue hasn't been able to join us yet, and hopefully she'll pop in when she can. But let's talk a little bit about the role of the student in the online environment too, things that you've seen here that may be different from your experience with regular students, but then also what are the things that you see of a typical online student behavior? And Linda, why don't you go ahead and start this time?
Okay, what I found out was that the campus students wanted structure. The distance students wanted structure also, but for the campus students, it was in a different way. I really wanted that real-time interactions with students because I'm an extrovert. I needed that. And so I set up lectures on Mondays and Wednesdays like we had during the regular semester, but we did not meet at 8:05 because none of us were happy about that even when we were on campus. So I set up the live lectures at 10 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays. Wednesdays, and they were recorded for those that couldn't attend. And I had an average of 30 students out of 39 of my campus class showing up because they wanted that structure. And they even told me in feedback and chats, thank you for doing this. So many of our classes were just the recorded lectures, and we really wanted a reason to be there and to show up. Some adapted well, and a few didn't. There was a couple in particular I was concerned about. I reached out to their advisors. One student I met one-on-one, and he struggles with depression. And he said, when I was on campus, I had a reason to be somewhere and a routine. And he said, this has been really hard for me to not have, even though I offered it, it wasn't the same as physically being present. So we needed to be aware, of that. And the other thing that was a really nice surprise in terms of my students is the distance students. Many of them showed up to the live lectures. They absolutely loved it. They said this was a silver lining for us. We were part of a class, and we were, interactive, and we got to ask questions and go to breakout sessions with campus students. So it's made me consider, when eventually we get back to what we call normal, maybe I want to do those live lectures, with Zoom, and let distance students have that opportunity, because that surprised me at how much they thrived in that environment.
It's interesting that you were able to offer sort of a different experience for your online students as well, and that, I know we've definitely as a university pushed that asynchronous environment in online, but there is a place for the synchronous session as well, and it really can support them. So Sheila, how have your students, you mentioned this briefly when you first started speaking, how have your students been doing?
I think it seems like they were really overwhelmed at first, but after some time, they kind of got acclimated and, really started focusing in. The one thing that I experienced was, and I think Linda mentioned this, was they really did want the structure. And even though normally those campus students aren't always looking, towards the kind of the what's next or what's ahead, a lot of them, were asking for everything to be opened, and so that they could work at their own pace. And I said, okay, well, we'll open it, and I'll just keep you on task with, here's a course calendar, and this is when everything's due. And I like how Linda talked about the flexibility, because I did allow that without necessarily, broadcasting it up front, but letting them know that, if they were reaching out because they were concerned, or I was reaching out because I was concerned because they hadn't been on Canvas, giving them that flexibility. But I opened up everything for them and let them really work at their own pace. And if they wanted to view the lectures 2 weeks in advance, then they got to do that. So, and I think that gave them felt like they had choices, and I think choices are good. And I think that helped, because I saw a lot of them not putting everything off until the last minute. There were still a few, but I think that was really good. I saw some good time management skills, I think, maybe come out of this too for some of them, and myself as well.
Great point. Yeah, the time management is pretty critical to being online, and giving them those choices really can help them to figure it out for themselves as well. Della, your experience.
Well, for my students, I really wanted to kind of mirror what we were doing in the face-to-face, but make it more accessible for them in the online setting. So we had group activities. We'd been doing a group project. So I'd had half my students already present, the other half hadn't. So I wanted to make sure they still had the option to work together, collaborate, present something to their peers. So I kind of did a combination of things. I started with a video that I recorded weekly for them. It was up to date. It was specific to what they were doing. It really reflected information not only from me, but I tried to pull in relevant, like TED Talks or videos from online that would kind of support the content I was sharing with them. Then I had them watch their peers' presentations. And then what I think was really helpful for them was they did a Flipgrid every week, kind of responding to what it is they got from the video I produced, from the video that their peers did, either Google Slides, Google presentations, they did Adobe Spark videos. The thing that I think helped my students was they had options when it came to how they were going to put together that group project. For my already online class section, they had to do a specific platform, VoiceThread, and they had to embed Adobe Spark videos, and then they had to have a Canva poster. So it's like a 3-step process. But for my transition from the face-to-face to online, I gave them the option of how they wanted to put that together, what was most meaningful for them, what tools they were most comfortable with, and we allowed for that. Just the only requirement I had was we could hear them in some format. So a lot of them defaulted to Google Slides presentations, which was really something they were comfortable with, and I was fine with that. But I think having that option of, okay, you're going to allow me to still do what I was doing, but do it in a different format and still make it meaningful. And then the weekly Flipgrids that they did responding to those things, they got to see each other, hear each other, make those connections. And I did ask them to watch their peers' Flipgrids, and they had to respond to at least 3 peers every week. So I think that ongoing connection really helped them get through this process in a meaningful way. I did ask them, I did a survey with them towards the end of the semester here. I asked them, would they have preferred just like doing discussion boards, or were the Flipgrids been more beneficial to them? And they said definitely the Flipgrids, because they got to see each other and hear each other. So they're still having that connection and communication.
Excellent, thank you. And Della is the one to talk to about awesome tools. She does a great job in her courses of using different tools, but then also supporting the students in their understanding of those tools and how to use them. So definitely reach out to Della on that. Eric, how have your students been doing in the online environment?
I think it started out like where we heard it. They're overwhelmed when they first start, and time management skills pretty poor when they start out. They'll like to email you at 1 o'clock in the morning with asking for directions because they don't read the directions, and self-motivation for some of them is really hard. But as time went on with posting the timelines and everything, they seem to really start picking up that self-motivated pace, and they did really well. It's just getting past that overwhelmed feeling when they first start online. Because again, we got to remember most of these kids weren't signed up for an online class. So I think it's just the time management is what they had to learn a lot of really quick. Because at first they started to turn assignments in at the last minute, and they found out that didn't work really well. So I mean, mostly it's basic time management.
Great point, thanks. Moving on to our next question. If you could kind of turn towards the regular online environment and your experience in that, what has surprised you about your experience teaching in this remote environment that you are going to bring to your regular online environment as we think about moving to the summer and moving from remote to fully online, starting out your courses in an online environment? What are you going to bring from this experience to enhance that?
Well, looking at that, some of the things I've done this time I want to bring to my regular online classes. I'm going to bring in the virtual office hours. I thought those were very, very useful. And what I did this time, I experimented with short videos throughout the semester to keep in touch with the students. And I think that helped a lot because they got some face time with you. They could see the picture of you and that you really care about the student. So I'm going to do a lot of that this time. I also noticed that my traditional students seem to do a lot better on the online format or my non-traditional did better on the online format than they did in the face-to-face, because they just seem to be more motivated there. But yeah, the big thing is I'm going to do more of the office hours. That I was really surprised how well that worked, because when going into using virtual office hours, I was very skeptical about no one's going to call in, and the number of call-ins that was great. So that's one of the big things I'm going to do.
Excellent, good. And Sheila, who I'll call on next, but she just posted a question asking you if you felt that having it open instead of being, sign up appointment times helped you with that.
Yeah, I think it did. Having it open, it did. I only had one time where I had 2 or 3 people waiting to meet, and that was about it, just 1 or 2 times.
Okay. All right, Sheila, what surprised you? What do you think you're going to carry over to your regular online environment?
Well, I think looking for some different tools like Della talked about, I started Googling Flipgrid because I've been hesitant about trying to use anything outside of Canvas just because I'm always worried that something's not going to go right. And I want to get past that hurdle. And so I want to try some new things like that, because I did see how students still wanted to feel connected and still wanted to have those interactions. And I think, the panelists have already brought up some really great points about allowing that to happen. And even in my normal online class, I haven't done that as much. And I only do that in the fall. And even looking towards the fall for that online class, I want to do more of those things. Just that communication and being able to see each other. And I've done a few things, but I think I can do more. And so that's what I want to do, is do more in that realm and use some of these cool tools that are available that I've been afraid to do before. So thanks for sharing those too, Della.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the technology is exciting, but also a little overwhelming sometimes. So making sure you're being very intentional about the technology that you use, and setting students up for success with that. They really can be a lot of fun and good ways to engage students. So Linda, what are your thoughts and surprises?
Well, one of the things I'd mentioned was considering doing Zoom sessions when I'm lecturing live on campus. One of the things that had surprised me was how many students actually showed up. So something else I did was I always offer what's called the Case Study Club, and it's sessions outside of class, primarily for our dietetic students. I teach an interdisciplinary health class. And it's usually, when I do it on campus, only the dietetic students that show up because they want to be prepared for internships. This time, because the students were looking for class opportunities, I had a lot of students show up to the case study clubs. There were 3 of them held every other week. The other thing that I did was our dietetic interns got pulled from their health facilities. They needed clinical contact hours. So I invited them to join us for the case study club to talk about more advanced cases. And the current students loved that, the pre-meds, the PAs, the other disciplines, because they got a chance to interact with students who were in hospitals but had been pulled, but had a significant time there. And they really liked the idea that they were interacting with these students. So I need to consider that in the future when I do the case study clubs, maybe keep them virtual so I can bring in guests. And someone asked in the questions, because I did teach my class on Mondays and Wednesdays, but at a different time, how did I decide on that time? I checked with the students first. I said, this is the time I'm considering. Does anybody have conflicts? I had seniors. None of them had classes held for the most part that they needed to attend at a specific time. They told me mine was the only one. But the other thing that I did was let faculty know this is the time I'm going to use. Is anybody else presenting at this time that might conflict? There was one faculty member who was bringing in a lot of guest lectures, and so those weren't always at a regular time. One day it did coincide at the same time as my lecture. I wanted my students to have the opportunity to attend that. So we just met an hour earlier so that they could then go to his session with a guest lecture, and he said he had about 15 of my students show up in his lecture also. So as long as you communicate ahead of time, it worked without any problems.
Great point. I know one of my sons is still getting up at 8 a.m. for, well, he's done now, but getting up at 8 a.m. for class, and it's been kind of tiring for him Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but at least he just has to hop online, right? He doesn't have to drive to school and find a parking space and all of that kind of thing. Okay, so Della, what has been your surprises and things you think you'll apply to regular online?
Well, in my regular online, I'm actually getting geared up to start a class next week. We have a MAT program, which is for Masters in Arts and Teaching. And that program, we're in a cohort 5. I teach the first class in the program. And when we started, we had like 50 students enrolled. This semester, we're anticipating close to 200 in a 3-week online course, for me anyway. So it's been really interesting to find out that a lot of the students in that program have never taken an online course, have not been in college for quite some time. So getting them oriented to everything can be very overwhelming. Some of them have never seen Canvas before, used Canvas. So for me, it's been really important to make sure that whatever I do, I provide tutorials, I provide tips for them, I provide examples as much as possible. Any tool that I ask them to use, like Flipgrid or VoiceThread, I have to make sure it works on both platforms, like a Mac and a PC. That's something that you have to really consider for students out there. I know one of the questions that came in was, how did you prepare for students who may not have the same access or who may struggle with the technology? I've had participants in the program who are 55 who have not used PowerPoint for like 20 years. So, and then I'm asking them to use all these new apps like VoiceThread and Flipgrid and Google Slides. I really stretch my participants though by having them try different platforms, something they haven't used before, because I want them to be familiar with what it is and how it can be applied in a school setting. All the apps that I ask them to use are things that are being used in public schools, since they are going to be teachers. I want them to be familiar with that. But what I've learned is really having clear examples, as much as possible tutorials for them online and that I provide that help them understand how to put things together. And then one thing that really I find has been beneficial in both the online traditional course I teach as well as the transition we made this semester, I had a chat open. So I just would post things for them, like encouraging messages, little videos they could watch. But then also in my online 3-week class, they start to take ownership of the chat and ask each other questions, clarification, directions on things. So they kind of take over and teach each other and mentor each other within the chat room, which I thought was great. In the 3-week course, I do go into that chat every day to make sure that I'm answering questions that they can answer for each other and supporting them, and just having that ability to check in, I think really gives them a lot of comfort and they feel supported in that sense. So those are some of the things that I'll take and continue to do throughout the courses.
Della, could you talk a little bit more about the chat? Are you what tool are you using for that chat?
I'm using the chat feature in Canvas.
Okay.
So I just go in and post questions for them. Some are just like the social emotional, how you doing? What questions do you have? Are you struggling with this assignment? Others will post, I'm not sure how to use this. Can you tell me where I can find a tutorial? Or if someone's not sure how to do it and other students figured it out, they said, oh, go to this place. It's really good. It'll help you out. So it's kind of a place for me to check in with them, but then they can join the chat anytime and post questions and help each other out as well. But I use the one in Canvas.
Excellent. And so Eleanor just posted a question as you were talking about scalability to larger classes, 150 to 500 enrollment. And your program with the MAT has really dealt with that scalability issue in a creative way. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, what we've done is to support our students and help give them that ongoing mentorship. We've created a system where they have a TA, and we try and we have right now, I think 15 TAs that will be going into this summer course. The nice thing about our TAs is a lot of them are EDD students, so they're in the College of Education. They are also pursuing a degree, so they're familiar with Canvas. They know how things work. But that TA system, I think, has been essential because we put them in smaller groups with each TA. So TAs will have anywhere from 5 to 10 students, and then it stay with those students throughout the whole program. So they become very familiar with the students, know who they are, can work with them, help support them. And the TAs support our grading as well. So I'll provide the TAs with samples of what I would do for feedback. They do the initial feedback, and then I go in and kind of monitor and support TAs as they're doing the feedback. I also try and do more broad messages to the students so they know I'm still looking at their coursework, even though the TA is the one primarily giving them feedback. I'll do like video messages for them on Canvas and just say, hey, great job. I really like the different things you've done with this assignment. And I try to pull out a couple of highlights from different people's assignments just so they know that I'm still connected with them as their instructor. But without the TAs, there's no way it would happen because I could not grade 150, 200 assignments a day and expect to survive. So the TA system has been critical for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And there's other questions about that sort of large environment. And so using groups functionality can be really valuable for that larger group, breaking them down. Do any of you use the groups tool, and how does that help you with managing sort of larger class environments?
We do use the group tool for our TAs, so we put them in cohorts, smaller groups. So each TA has 5 to 10 students, and then I use those cohorts for like different assignments. Like they're in, for example, they have a book club, so they do have to read a book and respond 2 times or 3 times throughout the semester to the book and kind of share information. So I group them in clubs based on kind of their TAs. So that way they have still that structured support of the TA and they know each other, but then they're also stretched with another group and connected with them. So where my students, I'll have 200 this semester, they can't necessarily get to know all 200, like doing activities together. But if I keep them in groups of 10 to 20, they're going to be able to make those connections and start to get to know their peers and make it more meaningful for them. So really trying to use those group functions to support that and build that community is really important. I know so there's a question on that. How do we kind of consider and keep them in that community? By setting it up with the TA groups, I think that is the first step. But also we make sure that we've given them visuals and ways to connect at a personal level. One of the first assignments I do with them is an autobiographical narrative, and they have to create an Adobe Spark video. So we can see them, we can hear them, and then they use pictures about them with themselves, their family, people who are important to them, where they've been to school. So they kind of get a little quick snapshot of the peers that are in their groups. So it kind of sets up that community from the get-go. And then that community just continues to build throughout the courses.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we have a request. If each of you could just in the chat post the names of tools, third-party tools that you've used in connection with your Canvas course, then I'll go ahead and make sure that we provide a list with links to each of those tools after this session. So let me go back up through the chat. We had a couple of other excellent questions. Let me see if I can see. Greg was asking a little bit more about the best way to schedule synchronous sessions in ways that encourage student involvement and minimize student schedule conflicts. And that's a great question, Greg. One thing that we always encourage folks to consider is you know, if you plan to have synchronous sessions, let your students know in the registration process. You know, as they sign up, tell them that synchronous sessions are going to be required, available Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., something like that, and make sure you're working with your department that there aren't conflicts with that. But then also offer them alternative ways if they're not able to attend that. Any other thoughts on those synchronous sessions? I know, Linda, you shared a couple of thoughts, but how do we encourage students to get involved, but then minimize those schedule conflicts?
So I'll share a couple of things that I did in order to get students to attend. During class itself, you can monitor people to see when you're kind of losing them and when do you need to switch things up. So I tried to make sure, because my lectures were an hour and 20 minutes each time, that about every 15 minutes we did something different to kind of get their attention again, and that fit with what I would do in class. But to encourage them to attend, I did some fun things. In class on campus, I would have a prize bag, just really cheap, fun stuff, that I get on clearance for 25 cents. I get food cards donated from local restaurants, and I would encourage participation by pulling out of the prize bag. So this time I did weekly food drawings. They, as a class, pick the 3 restaurants that they would like to have a $5 card from to be in the drawing for. So every week when you attended Monday and Wednesday, you got a ticket into drawings. And so they thought that was fun to see whose name was drawn. I also had some outside activities, didn't require much time on their part. It supported one of my goals of the class, that if they did these outside activities that didn't count towards their grade, they could earn tickets into drawings. And those prizes were the right to name the last exam. So distance class got to name the exam. Campus did too. They had fun with that. They some other students also got to pick some videos to show, music videos, because I always tie those into lectures. And so they had fun picking the music video that we were going to watch. And the other students, got a kick out of what their classmate had chosen and why. So just throwing in some fun activities periodically to break it up and give them, one student said, thanks for giving me a reason to show up. I didn't win a food card, but every week I was hoping my name was going to be drawn. So it was just little things like that. And I saved so much gas money driving back and forth to Manhattan, I could buy the food cards. Oh, I will say that the drawing that the videos where they could choose them and naming them, I also had a grand prize of a $10 food card to a restaurant.
Any other thoughts on engagement and getting students to show up for those online sections, but then also alternatives that you give them if they are not able to attend those?
I know there's been questions about, with online courses, do we release all the information at once or do you do it in smaller pieces? For me, with the MAP program, that's a 3-week course, I only release a week at a time. And I know there's been some discussion about that, whether for students who really want to work ahead or students who feel like they need that. I believe that if they work too far ahead, they're not going to get meaningful, or not going to be able to make meaningful connections to the content or to each other. So I only release a week at a time. Within that week, there's multiple assignments, different things they're doing, of course. But I have set up an ebook for the course. So they have something that was written specifically for them, specifically to reflect the course content. And then they can see a chapter at a time of that ebook. Right now it's 10 chapters. I've submitted a proposal for revision to that because we're in cohort 5 and I feel like I need to update that information. But I release the first 3 chapters the first week, the next 3 chapters week 2, and then the final chapters week 3. That way, I also make sure there are weekly quizzes about the content from the chapters. I know that they've actually looked at it and read. A lot of times with our online students, if you have a video or if you have content you need them to cover, unless you have some way to check in on that, I feel like they won't do it. So I try and make sure I have those weekly video quizzes or weekly quizzes for them to kind of make sure they're getting that content, and then I have them apply that content in the different activities they do as well. But without a check of some sort, I feel like we lose a lot of important connections. So having those touch points, I think, is really important.
And I agree with you. They've got to have that connection. I post the entire outline for the course, but I gate it per module because I want them to have those discussions with each other and not work that far ahead and not have that interaction. So I agree with you.
Excellent. Linda, there was a question about how you track attendance through your process.
So I did it through the participant list in Zoom. I took screenshots. I found out don't take screenshots right as we're starting lecture because I may have 15 and then 10 minutes later, all of a sudden I have 25 and then 15 minutes later I had 30. So I would wait till about 15 minutes because that's normally when I would stop and break up what we're doing, and I'd let them know, okay, everybody that's here, I'm taking a quick screenshot of the participant list. And then I used an online random generator that if 30 people showed up on Monday and Wednesday, and then so I had a total of 60. I would just do an online generator, and however they showed up in the chat list, the participant list is how the numbers were assigned.
Awesome, thanks. We had another great question earlier in the chat. If you all could share from the beginning your online course structure and your planning process, sort of those tips and tricks for making the online format run smoothly from your planning and beginning process.
Well, there's definitely a lot of planning up front when it comes to online. What I did is I outlined the whole course into a course outline and put the open and close dates to those outlines on that. And that helped a lot, and posted that to the student. I also linked all the assignments in the outline, and I had that posted on the homepage of the course. So all they had to do is go to the homepage of the course, click on the assignment, and it took them right to the assignment.
My class was already online because I teach the distance version, and so the campus students had all their materials already in a Canvas course. So really the only planning I had to do in addition was, because we lost a week and we got behind, I had to decide what could I give up, how could I reduce the stress for the students. So some due dates changed, and again, I had to change to more frequent communication with the campus students, but I was fortunate in that it didn't really require a lot of extra work on my part because we were kind of already in that mode and the students were used to it.
I was just going to add to Eric's. I think really at first just figuring out what the time frame is for your course and setting those due dates and providing that to the students so they know what's upcoming, whether you release your course all at once or not. At least they have an idea of what that class is going to look like. And I think it's helpful from a planning perspective to be able to then plan all of your activities and your videos around that overall course schedule.
I kind of wanted to share and also have a quick question. Yeah, so I'm a graduate teaching assistant. It's the first time I was teaching online. I had to switch, and we didn't have much time. I remember Laura mentioned in a seminar that you have to prepare like 16 weeks or something in advance, and so we didn't have that, and it was a big struggle having 2 kids at home, be able to record those videos, having alone time to record. So I also released only 1 week at a time because that's all I was able to prepare. But what helped a lot, I think, is that I had different people also, like Laura, and I also had a professor who taught online who I asked because I didn't know. All of a sudden I didn't know, how do I let them know, like, this is what you do first, like you watch the lecture, or during the lecture I would show videos, and then I'm like, where do I put that? How do I let them know? So the professor who I asked told me that, hey, just at the beginning of each week, send them an email, literally like, number 1, this is what you do. Number 2, this is what you do. Number 3. And that helped a lot, because when I asked for feedback later on from students, a lot of the students who emailed me said that helped them a lot, that I did it at the very beginning of the week, where I would release my lectures, and I would send them an email saying like, hey, first you watch this video, and then you watch the lecture, and then you like complete this assignment. And the biggest part of them like having a week that they could do it at any time that they had to do that. So that helped a lot. You have to go. Yes, sorry. So yeah, I think so that, yeah, definitely helped a lot. And my question is about participation, because when I was teaching, so I'm teaching 2 classes this semester. So in both classes, I had in-class participation. And when we started teaching online, I had to get rid of on that in-class participation. Like, one part of it was because I already had some discussion boards built into my class that already had graded differently. But because I had so many students, I couldn't figure out easier way to be able to grade that many students every time they participated. So my question is like, what are the other ways? Are there any ways that they could earn participation like automatically, where I didn't have to go in and grade? That would already, although I don't know if it's possible because you have to read the content or what they're posting, but are there any suggestions to for like how to build in participation where it would add in too much extra work? Thank you.
Okay, well, what I did, because I wanted, for when we did the transition from face-to-face to online, I also had participation points. So what I told them was the weekly content-based videos that I recorded and the peer group projects they had to watch, those became their participation points. In order to see whether or not they did that, they had to do the Flipgrid. And the Flipgrid had specific prompts for them, like, what did you learn from the content-based video this week? What's one key insight you got from a guest presenter? What's one takeaway you got from your peers presentation? and then they had to respond to 3 other peers. So that became their accountability for participating. They had to be able to watch those videos and respond to the prompts. In my online course that I teach normally, one of the things I've really done to make sure they are participating is to build in those structures for grading, that by completing this assignment, this is going to be their participation points. So I know that each activity they're doing is kind of accountable for that. In order to help my participants be prepared for that, I do 2 main things I'm going to kind of revert back to where we're talking about what we do to prepare for our online courses. Because I have such a short turnaround time, I need to know who my participants are right away. So the first assignment they have is a survey that they have to go into the quizzes tab in Canvas, and they complete a survey that asks them about their technology, what access they have to tools, what kind of internet connection they have. It asks them about, their prior schooling experiences, a variety of questions. I think I have like 20 questions there. Some are specific to like platforms they're using, and some are more about their background. So I can have a good sense of who my participants are. The nice thing about doing that on Canvas through the quizzes tab is you can do the feature where you can see a graph real quickly of what participants are doing. So like I have one question there, people who actually have education backgrounds and people who aren't. So I can see right away for a percentage, like I might have 70% that have no experience in schools, whereas I have 30% who are paraprofessionals coming back to get a degree. So having that quick insight gives me a good gauge of what I need to do and how I need to change my instruction to meet the needs of my students. I've learned over the course of 5 cohorts that the more specific you can be, the better. Making sure that everything is super clear. I have rubrics that are very detailed, but I think the rubrics help them know that, okay, if I've done this, this, and this, I'm gonna get a good score. So having that real clarity and real transparency in what you present for students, I think is very, very important.
Thank you so much. Helps a lot.
Other thoughts on that? Participation pieces? One thing I would add, it kind of mirroring what Della's saying in terms of Canvas quizzes. Canvas and MediaSite both have some great analytics that you can look at. And and also MediaSite, you can embed short quiz questions or surveys into your video content itself. So that's a way to kind of check it. Are they actually watching, right? Because they can be watching through the video, it stops at that quiz or survey question. So they have to answer it before they can go on. So they're not just turning it on and walking away, right? So that's one way you can kind of check. And really it's getting into, what's the point of your participation, right? Are you trying to gauge that their butts were in the seats in the classroom, right? So that's really low level. Right? So you're just, you could use those analytics in MediaSite or Canvas. Did they actually look at this stuff? Did they actually open the pages and engage with the material? That's a fine low level, check. But if you're looking at understanding of the material, that's where you have to dive into those discussions or quizzes or something like that you want to really understand how deeply they engaged with the content.
So quick question, based on what you mentioned about building in your participation, like questions and throughout the videos, are those usually done like after? Can you usually do those after you record all your videos? Or
Yeah,
it has to
absolutely. No, you can plug those in after you either record your video in MediaSite or load it into MediaSite. You would then be able to choose a spot to embed a quiz or survey into it. I'm happy to link some of the guides to that regarding how to do that in MediaSite.
I was just going to ask, where can we learn about it and everything?
Yeah, I'll make sure that that this awesome list that we're collecting in the chat of tools and stuff that's included as well.
Thank you.
One thing I found out MediaSite, sometimes it takes a lot of The files are too big for students to download and see. So one thing I've been doing is uploading everything to YouTube. And it's an easy way to link in the YouTube link into your modules for students. And that has been very, very good because most students can access YouTube pretty easily. And then when I have them upload videos, I do ask them to, as much as possible, put things in YouTube as well so that other people can access. And with YouTube, it's nice because you can enable a captions feature. So for students who need that captioning, you can have it. Flipgrid also does captioning. So students who record videos, you can see what they say right below the video in a closed caption, which is very nice.
Okay, good. I was trying to type out a response to Eleanor's question about captioning in MediaSite. There is, and as Trina said, there is a very low cost option we can certainly share with folks. That you also have the ability to upload a transcript, and that would pretty closely mirror your content within the MediaSite video. It's not free auto captioning the way you can do in YouTube. The MediaSite video, actually, if it's well and properly embedded within Canvas, they should be able to play it. And strength of that is that it adjusts to their bandwidth. So they actually should have a decent time streaming within Canvas, but Della's right. Trying to download MediaSite videos, they're very, very large, and so you wouldn't want to set it up in a situation that they would need to download that content. All right, we do have just a few minutes more. I'm going to invite others to unmute yourself if you have questions for our panelists.
Yes, this is Don from Polytechnic Campus. Any insights, tips regarding trying to carefully balance delivering content versus overwhelming students with trying to teach them new online tools? I've been kind of overwhelmed this morning in the number of great suggestions on tools to use, but a concern in being a beginner in a lot of this is trying to balance that with delivering content.
Yeah, one thing I've done with that is I try to give them options. So for example, they have the book clubs that they do. I give them 5 different platforms to choose from when they complete those book club assignments. They only have to do 2, so they have 5 options, pick 2. I try to do something that's fairly familiar for them, like Google Slides, which is pretty similar to PowerPoint. It doesn't take a whole lot for them to do that tool. And then something that maybe they're not as familiar with, like Haiku Deck or Sway or a Prezi. There's also another great tool called eMaze. Each of the tools I give them tutorials to kind of help them. One of the things I tell them up front is they are going to be thrown a lot of new tools. Some of them are like, well, this isn't a computer course. Why are you giving me all these tools to learn? But I give them a rationale for that. All the tools I use are tools they're going to see in their future classrooms. So there's a purposeful selection in using those tools. It's not just I'm trying to overwhelm you and give you all these things to do. There's a rationale and a purpose behind it. But giving them as much support with tutorials, examples, if you can provide them with something that's been done in the past so they can see. Whenever I ask them to do their autobiographical narratives, it's the first actual tool they'll use is Adobe Spark Video. I have one posted for them to see, and then all the TAs have created Adobe Spark videos as well, so they get to know us and see the examples through our videos, and then they can create their own. So the more you can provide that rationale and support with any tool you ask, making sure too that all tools are free. Sometimes I ask them to use Prezi. There's 2 versions of Prezi, one that's free and one that's not. I always say that whatever tool I require you to use, it's going to be free. You're not going to have to pay for anything, which I think is really important to a lot of people. They don't want to go in and spend hundreds of dollars on applying for tools that they may never use again.
And I would add to that, we have to keep in mind that learning new tools could be very stressful for them. My campus students, many of them were stressed out by the idea that they might have to take proctored exams. And Global made it so that they didn't have to pay any fees, which was wonderful, but they were still very concerned about, I'm already stressed on your exams to begin with, and now you're going to ask me, to do it on the computer. So I decided it wasn't worth their stress levels. So I made all my exams open book, open note, with time to represent the course. I increased the complexity of some questions and warned them they're going to have to do a little bit more in-depth application now, but got a lot of positive feedback about how that, yes, that even my distance students who were used to proctored exams said that still significantly reduced my stress level.
Yeah, I think it's made clear with Della that really the apps that she's using is really incorporated into part of the curriculum, that using those apps is something, she's in a unique situation. So it wouldn't be the norm to throw a bunch of tools at students, and we certainly wouldn't encourage that if it wasn't part of your curriculum.
That's a great point, Trina. And I think one thing that we've definitely heard from students, and the panel we had in the last cohort stressed this as well, is be the expert yourself, right? Don't just add technology for technology's sake. If you find a tool that really works well for you and you want your students to use it to express themselves, then use that one tool, focus on that one tool as a way to enhance your course. Della's structure is very important for their program, her being the first class that those students have. They will use those tools in their own classrooms as they go out and become teachers too. So all of that is very, very focused on their program. But don't use a technology that you are not comfortable with yourself, because your students will know. Right? And so right now, get really comfortable with Zoom, right? Get really comfortable with Canvas, get really comfortable with MediaSite. And so you'll see in the OCDI that we don't introduce a whole bunch of tools. We definitely thought about it. We love all the tools that Della's introduced here. They're amazing, but we also didn't want you to feel overwhelmed. So I will provide after this a link to all of the great tools that have been shared in the chat, and those can be options that you can explore, but we're staying with the basics in the OCDI to make sure that you can get comfortable in the basics that K-State provides. So we are out of time. Do we have any last thoughts from our panelists that you want to share real quick?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Della.
Okay. I would just say that I definitely agree with Laura. You want to be comfortable with the tools you're asking your students to use. I make sure that I model those tools with them. So like in our week 2 video, if I've asked them to use VoiceThread, I've created a VoiceThread for them and teach using the VoiceThread, so they know that I'm not asking them to do something that I wouldn't do. So yeah, being very comfortable with any tool you ask your students to do is critical.
I just want to say, be patient with the students for online. A lot of them don't read instructions. You'll get a lot of emails asking about the instructions, and they'll be right there. So be patient and send them the instructions again. Email assignment reminders. I spend a little bit of time emailing assignment reminders to students to get them back engaged in your class, because they do have other online classes. And again, I can't really stress enough, use those virtual office hours.
Thank you all so much for being on our panel today, and thank you to everyone for attending. This was a great group. We had great questions. If we missed anything in the chat, or you come up with other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Trina, myself, or any of the panelists. I have no doubt that they'd be happy to talk you through those, and we'll get the recording posted soon. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon.